morning, good evening, good night, good afternoon, wherever you are, whatever you are, whoever you are. If you're who, I don't care. If you're a Doctor Who, I do. This is the Aunty Sochelle Hour-ish from the beautiful town of Lake Las Vegas. No, why do I keep saying Las Vegas? It's like I have this dream of going someplace where everybody loses money. America, Lake America, no, Lake Vancouver, that's it. Vancouver, Washington, which is the pretty Vancouver, but not the gorgeous Vancouver. This is my dog, Tribble, who's decided to be a TV star today. Hello, Tribble. She will be making noise throughout the broadcast. Today, we have a fabulous person. I'm going to mispronounce his name, not sort of, maybe because his name is similar to mine. Mr. Michael Broussard. Vous avez Michael Broussard? Yeah. And
perfect.
Well, good. He is a talented writer and improviser and artist and speaker and performer. And much like me, he does a lot of different things for a lot of cool reasons. And we are going to talk to him today about several things. Now, you might have noticed at the beginning of this video, there is a warning because during some of this conversation, we may be talking about one of his shows and his website, which is I Am a Sexual Survivor. No, what is the site?
It is sexabusesurvivor.com.
Thank you. Sexabusesurvivor.com, which is not a game show, although it does sound like something you get the big torch for and people chase you around the neighborhood. So we'll talk about that. So you have been warned. And if you don't remember an adult warning, this is not a kid's show anyway, but just so you know, we might talk about stuff that may be a little uncomfortable for some, maybe a little too comfortable for others, which were, you know, but mostly we're going to have a good time because this is a fun show. We love this show. And you guys have been very sweet in all your comments, and we got some really great guests coming up, but the best guest is today's guest, Michael. Nice to meet you. Here go my glasses.
It's it's great to meet you too, and you're exceedingly nice about me and my strangeness, and I appreciate that. Thank you so very much.
Why people are all strange. Why be different?
Be different.
Yeah,
but don't be different.
No,
be the same as in different, like everybody that I know that I like.
There was a great conversation we had online the other day with a bunch of Barbie girls that are very gorgeous and beautiful, and they're only in their 20s and they think they're fat and all that. And one of them made a comment of, I can't stand the idea of getting old because I'll get wrinkles. And I'm like, you know what? Nobody wants to be a blank slate. You got to have like
stars.
You got to have stars. You got to have, my neck makes weird shapes. It doesn't look like vagina neck or anything, but you know what I mean? But everybody grows and you get a little older, and I'd rather be getting older than getting better. That's just me.
This is a good point. I'd rather be getting balder than getting deader.
There you go. My husband is completely bald. I rub his head. I make a wish. And now I have eyes.
My wife loves the fact now that I'm bald because she doesn't have to worry about messing up my punk rock spikes because they're not there anymore. She would like pet my head and be like, but my hair's going to get screwed up.
Did you have to
punks are
colors and stuff, didn't you?
I had, well, actually, okay, let me tell you how the whole punk rock thing, right? So I grew up, and before punk came along, because I grew up in the 70s, before punk came along, my favorite music was everything before me.
Yes.
Was like socially relevant hippie music and 1950s music and people like Gene Pitney and people like Janis Joplin and all this stuff, because I was completely disinterested in what I was hearing on the radio unless it was Black Sabbath or David Bowie.
Oh yes, David Bowie. To this day, still one of my
quick point about Black Sabbath. Have you ever been in a band?
Many times.
Okay, so you might understand this. Every band, I don't care whether you're a folk band, I don't care whether you play classical violin, I don't care what kind of a band you are. At some point in rehearsal, you will start playing Iron Man. That is a given. You may never play it out, but everyone always plays Iron Man. That has nothing to do with what I'm saying, but I just wanted to mention it. So I grew up, and I'm listening to this music. So I grew up, and I'm listening to this music, and I'm like, oh, that stuff's cool because it's smart.
Yeah.
And the other stuff is crap because it's, big stadium rock, and I'm a lot mellower about it now. But then I was like, fuck that stuff. And then along comes punk music. And I'm like, holy moly, this is rock and roll for me. I'm in my teens, and these people are angry, and I am angry, and these people are kick-ass, and I want to be kick-ass, and all that wonderful stuff. And I didn't know how to be a punk because I grew up in a little town called Clinton in Massachusetts, and I was like the only
I'm
punk
also
kid.
a masshole. I totally get it.
And so my idea of being a punk at that time, okay, previous to that, I had hair all the way down my back. I mean, down to my waist because I considered myself a hippie. I was a 12-year-old hippie. Um, my mom pissed her off to no end. Cut your freaking hair.
What's
Cut
wrong?
your freaking hair. Cut your freaking hair. What's wrong with you? Cut your freaking hair.
Get out of here.
And so one day, after having seen the film Liquid Sky, which people should see, yes, all right.
Oh, yes.
I was the only one in the theater in Worcester for that showing. No one else showed up, but I loved it. So after seeing Liquid Sky, I took the newspaper ad for Liquid Sky to the hairdresser with, the character with the hair combed back and everything. And I had that, and I had the cover of Walter Tevis's novel, Man Who Fell to Earth.
I still.
And so it wasn't Bowie, but it was sort of Bowie, right? So I said, these two things, this is what I want to look like. And while you're at it, pierce my ear.
Nice.
So I came home and I said, Mom, I cut my hair. And she looked at me and she was just like,
yeah. This is
so, yes.
Clinton, Massachusetts.
This is what I'm saying. So I don't know how to be a punk, but I'm doing my best to be a punk. And I was not willing to follow the punk rules,
which made you even more
which were, well, exactly what I'm saying. Like, you're not supposed to like the Beatles anymore. Fuck that. I like the Beatles.
Sgt. Pepper.
I like the Buzzcocks. I like the Dead Boys, and I like the Beatles.
Skinny,
and I'm not dropping that.
Skinny Pumpy, Lydia Lunch, and
yes,
Black Flag. Oh, I've seen her many times. And Black Flag, and the original Black Flag, not the Rollins Black Flag, and then
right.
go to what's the name of the damn club? Club Fugazi. There was another club in Boston, in Ralston. The Rathskeller. Go to the Rathskeller. And I've
been to the Rathskeller. Yes.
Because we grew up at the same time, and in Massachusetts, and you see these bands and these punk bands, and then you go see like Ralph Bakshi's American Pop, and what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to run fountains. I'm like, that was
me. yes. So we're out here, we're doing our weird thing, and it took me many decades to get into bands. I didn't get into bands when I was young because I was insecure. I was agoraphobic. I was suffering from trauma. I wasn't really interacting with other people. I was bullied whenever I went outside.
Me too.
So most people get in bands when they're 15 or 16 or 17. I get in bands in my 30s by the time I'd moved to the Philadelphia area.
Wow.
And then I went through several iterations of the hair.
Right.
Where the hair went back being long but kind of scraggly and weird for a while. And then I started putting stuff in it. And like 4 bands down the line, I finally got to the point where I was like, this is the hair, and I'm going to change the color every week and bleach the fuck out of it. And my hairdresser's always like, you're killing your hair. I'm like, I don't care.
It's not going to be there.
And this is what I'm saying. So I get past that point, and I'm no longer in bands, and I've started to act. And I'm trying to get parts. So I let the punk hair drop because I was trying to have a hairstyle that I could get.
It's hard to do Hamlet when you look like, Henry Rollins. Yeah.
Well, exactly. So for many years I had the punk hair, and that was really, really cool. 2020, okay, March of 2020, just when the pandemic was coming down, I had been back from Gallifrey 1, my favorite Doctor Who convention, for a few weeks. And since getting back from the convention, I was having headaches that were so god-awful that I would just put my head down sometimes and cry for a little while. And I didn't know what it was. This is going to hook up, I promise you. So I'm having these headaches. It's going to get there. I'm having these headaches. And I go to my PCP, and he's like, well, have you ever had a sinus headache? And I said, no. He said, that's what this is. You just don't know because you've never had a sinus. I'm like, no, you don't understand.
Yeah.
My skull is tearing in half. I feel like I'm going to... He didn't get it. And he's like, I talked him into getting me a CT scan, right? I talked him into getting a CT scan. He didn't think, he's like, well, you're just going to see that there's nothing, no problem at all. And I go to get the CT scan. And I'm walking back down the hill from the hospital and my cell phone rings. And I ignore it because I don't recognize the number. And I get home. And I had an answering machine back then.
Oh, yes.
And a landline.
That's
right. You come home and you look. And I get home and the answering machine's blinking. And I push the button. And it's basically the guy who read the CT scan. And he's saying, come back to the hospital right now. There is blood on your brain. You are in danger. Come back now. I pushed the message on my phone. It's the same guy. And I'm running up the hill back to the hospital, right? Oh. The crux of this and how it relates to my hair is I had to have a craniotomy because I had a subdural hematoma, which meant blood had gathered. This is something you need to put a warning sign up for people.
Swollen? Yes.
Yeah, the blood gathers between your skull and your brain, and it pushes both ways. And so it was constant pain, and it wasn't going to stop unless that was...
It's bigger than a migraine. Yeah.
Did they exactly
do it the whole?
It was, it was a jackhammer actually. Yeah. But they did. They cut into my head, and they put staples in it, which was kind of cool afterwards. So it was kind of neat to have staples for a while.
Yeah, that is.
But as of the craniotomy, my hair loss began in earnest.
Wow. They didn't know what caused.
And so, we don't know to this day. We don't know. Wow. They're like, well, the blood's recent. When did you have recent head trauma, right? So I was like, I don't know. I said, I banged my head like 3 months ago, but there's not that. Sure. It's got to be recent. Oh, we came up with a theory eventually. Let's circle back to trauma, shall we?
Yes. Trauma, my favorite.
Exactly. So I was at a point in my life where I would get angry at myself when I made mistakes. I would get frustrated with myself. And when I would get frustrated with myself, I would take my fist and I would hit my forehead. Or I would literally bang my head against the wall. Oh. It was 4 or 5 appointments down the line with the neurologist at the follow-up where I said, I used to bang my head against the wall frequently and hit myself on the forehead. Would that cause it? He's like, how long have you been doing it? I said, about 15 years. That could have caused it.
Oh,
So if you want to know how trauma affects people physically, mentally, emotionally.
Wow.
So I lose the hair and I only have hair in the middle. And I'm like, for a little while, I'm trying to hide the scar. Uh-huh. And then I was like, screw this. Let's accentuate the scar.
Yes.
And so I just got everything shaved off on the side. So the scar is visible here. And there was a straight up spike of color.
Wow.
And I got back my punk hair after all those years. I was like, you know what? This is who I am, and I'm going to do this. And more recently, the hair loss started in here, and the spike was no longer possible. And my hairdresser says, do you want me to shave your head? And I'm like, well, I don't want to look like Goebbels.
Yeah.
But, I was like, okay, let's do it. She shaves my head. And at first I'm like, whoa, what the hell am I looking at? But then I discovered hats.
See, hats are great. Hats are
awesome. I love hats. I wrote a poem about losing my mohawk and gaining hats. I went from an orange spike to an orange hat.
Nice.
I have half a dozen hats now. Hats are great for expressing yourself.
Do I have some over here? Yes, I have Renaissance fair hats, and I have pirate hats, and I have a Paul Revere hat.
Nice. I Ren Fair. I love the Ren Fair.
Yeah, me too.
See, if you're punk, you're not supposed to love the Ren Fair. Screw that. I love the Ren Fair.
Yeah, there's lots of goths and punks that do Ren Fair. They're lying if they don't.
There are tons and tons of them. The most punk rock thing, as we said earlier, the most punk rock thing you could possibly do is like stuff that's not punk rock.
That's right. I watched Sound of Music, and it's the only and Evita. Those are my 2 musicals. And that's okay, those are my punk rock things. It's like nobody else likes
West Side Story.
Oh, there you go.
I got into Alice Cooper because of West Side Story. I was like 11 and I was in love with West Side Story. It was like my favorite thing. And then the Schools Out record comes out and it has on it something he's calling Gutter Cats versus the Jets. And it's basically Here Come the Jets from West Side Story. with some sound effects. And that's how I got into Alice Cooper.
Oh, that's so cool. I got into a Motown, similar thing. I was listening to Arlo Guthrie, again, a punk rock, non-punk rock thing. A good old Arlo Guthrie, who got me into Woody Guthrie, who got me into Motown. So it's like, because the talking blues was rap back then, so I was listening to all the Motown stuff. B.B. King.
Yes.
So cool.
The more, as I get older, I think it's, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Music is my favorite drug.
I think I love music. Oh my God. Oh, love is the drug. Roxy music. The thing about music and being in bands over the years, I feel like if you're in bands and you're paying attention, you start liking music that isn't like the music you're playing or isn't like the music that you're expected to like.
Right.
And the older I got, the more I got into music, and the more I was involved in playing music, the more I get into other kinds of music. My wife brings into the marriage the Nipper's Greatest Hits CDs, there's one for the 20s, one for the 30s, one for the 40s, one for the 50s. And a lot of that music is fantastic. Oh my God, it is so great. It is silly. It is ridiculous. It is moody. It is heartrending. I mean, the stuff that would be hits in a year would range from like a song about a guy who wanted to fly over the prison walls to a song about two little squirrels who were looking for a nut.
What was this? The sea little fishy swim if you can, and a swam.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The two little squirrels is Louis Jordan. Louis Jordan is there once were two little squirrels who love to romp and play. My favorite part of that song is when he said, "We've got walnuts, chestnuts, all the best nuts, every kind but donuts."
He's got a whiskey drink. He's got a vodka drink. It's that song.
Exactly. Yes, it's that thing exactly.
Yeah.
That thing exactly. But yeah, and my interest ranged wide. Before I was into punk and before I was into all that stuff, I was already, as a kid, I was watching The Great Entertainment at like 11:30 at night or whatever it was, with Frank Avrush hosting Massachusetts. Frank Avrush hosting the classic films. And he would, he'd stand next to the poster and he would ask trivia questions, between commercials and stuff like that. Frank Avrush was also our bozo.
I was going to say, he was the bozo the clown. And also Frank Avrush, for those who are unaware, would you stop it, please? Thank you. The dogs are singing in harmony. We're also, he would come out dressed in a tux with a cummerbund.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Frank Avrush. I'm from Boston. And he'd have this Boston accent, but it was Back Bay Boston. So it was a little bit more expensive than real Boston accent. Like you would never see him at Fenway Park watching the Red Sox, but you would definitely see him at Boston Common watching the Swan boats. That's the Boston he was. But totally. And then he was Bozo the Clown. I was like, what?
Yeah.
We also had a guy, Major Mudd, who was a space cat who used to dress up in space.
Yeah. I also remember on Bozo, I remember watching, oh my God, we're going through all this stuff. On Bozo, I remember watching the cartoons, and there was a Hercules cartoon with like Hercules' sons were like, hello, Herc. And the symbol they had on their belts was this H, and it was basically the Honda symbol. And these are the kids are like, that's the Honda emblem, is what that is on your belts. And as the child I was, I found that hilarious that Hercules had a little H that was the Honda symbol on his belt, because these are the things that go through my brain. Like,
did you watch Davy and Goliath? Hello.
Oh my God, Davy and Goliath. I didn't realize it was religious at first. It was just claymation, man.
And then Moral Oral came out, and I was like, yes, they knew exactly what we were watching.
Yes, that was exactly, they got that so right. Yes. So perfect. I don't know, Davy. Maybe we shouldn't light that house on fire. I don't know, Davy. Maybe we shouldn't try to bring down the oligarchy. I don't know, Davy.
Exactly. How dare we fight the power? And then
how dare we fight the power?
Yeah, and then we become Rage Against the Machine, as you do. See,
exactly.
We grew up in the same vibe of the 70s in Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah.
So totally get it. And we also had they have Family Guy now, but back then, wait till your father gets, wait till your father gets home. We know. I mean, that was Family Guy back then, and it was
right.
5 people from Boston all ragging on their dad with the laugh track in the background. So,
Of course.
cartoon. Yeah. That's the kind of life we live. No wonder we grew up the way we did.
Well, exactly. One of the things I talk about, let's talk a little bit about the show about trauma.
Why, let's do
Ask a Sex Abuse Survivor, it's called. Ask a Sex Abuse Survivor. And the idea behind it is that I tell my story, but I also field questions from the audience all throughout. And so we end up having a conversation, which is great. You know, we've been doing this since like 2014. But I talk a lot about the way media and it intertwines with trauma, you know, and the way we see things and the way we're affected by things. And I talk about like my happy place was when I was being traumatized, was visiting my grandmother. And when I visited my grandmother, she thought I was like her favorite person in the world. I was this little kid and she was like cookies, candy, ice cream, Nestle's Quick. 2 flavors of Nestle's Quick. She had the strawberry too. And I would sit there. She had a cool UHF antenna and I would sit there and I would watch like all those awesome cartoons. But more than that, I would watch Creature Double Feature. And that was my happy place. I was a teenage werewolf. I was a teenage Frankenstein. Oh, like a tarantula. This was my happy place.
The head that wouldn't die.
The head that wouldn't. I just saw that again.
I love that movie.
It's great. It's so. Some of those movies.
They were so beautiful. They were so beautiful. And the photography was gorgeous. I loved them.
Oh my God. And yeah, many of them. And then sometimes the photography was like, but that was fine, right? Yeah. I Was a Teenage Frankenstein. It has like the greatest cheap movie moment of all time. Where literally, if I recall it correctly, literally the scientist is standing out front of his house and off camera, you hear a screech and a crash and an accident happens you don't see. And that's where he gets his parts from.
Which is also how I got my date for the prom that I didn't go to.
Well, fair enough. You know, absolutely. Yeah, I can see that happening.
Arts.
I can totally see that happening. But yeah, I mean, the trauma thing is interesting because as a child who was isolated by trauma, I grabbed onto media and I grabbed onto what we were just talking about, the classic films, you know, Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant and Spencer Tracy.
Hi, everybody.
And Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn and I forget the name of the movie, but Mrs. Uptake, Intake, Outtake, where he was an inventor and she was his assistant.
Yes, I know. Yeah, I'm bad on names, but
you know what I'm talking about, though.
Exactly.
You know what I'm talking. Yeah. I used to. It was a while where I was signing letters back when we actually wrote letters. I was signing letters, Mrs. Uptake, Intake, Outtake. Because you know, and all that stuff is solace to me, and I think that that's still solace to me because, well, I have managed a lot of the trauma, and doing the show helps with a lot of the trauma, and has apparently also helped other people. That's great.
How old were you when it
disappearing to those things is still so important?
Yeah, I was 11 when I had my first instance with my uncle, who was, excuse the word, mentally retarded, but he was mentally retarded, and he would come into my room in my Nana's house and say, I want to show you some things, and I would race to the bathroom. So I remember all of those things. And again, I latched onto television like it was the only clue I had that there were things outside of my brain. So totally like that. I'm still to this day like that.
Things outside of my brain. I love that. Things because my brain was, like you're saying, you had your first experience then. My first experience, I was 7. And the world turned upside down. Like, what's going on now? What is happening in my life? And I don't know about you, but for me, a lot of it was I didn't know whether this was normal or not.
Right.
I didn't know whether this is just what happened to kids when they were young. I had no frame of reference whatsoever.
And you try to talk to else, like, what do you mean? When did that happen to you? Oh, you know, when.
Exactly. You know, like, what do you, oh, really? That never happened to you? That's not.
Yeah.
That's just not what happens to kids.
Yeah. You don't have.
So I
who does this? No? Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay, well.
And well, the really interesting thing about that, of course, is growing up, doing the show that I do, and I've been doing it for like 11 years now.
So talk about.
And during that period of time.
Tell me
right. During that period of time that I've been doing the show, what I do is I used to do it live, and now I do it only online. Things changed after COVID.
Yeah.
But what I do is I come out on stage and I'll start telling my story, and it's a little vignette of the first part of the story, and that starts when I'm a kid before the abuse, and how things were great, and how I was happy and how I was fearless and how there was no insecurity, there was no I wasn't afraid of anything, and I wasn't self-conscious,
Questioning
you
it.
know,
Yeah.
questioning everything. I talk about the fact that at that age, I was a show-off kind of kid. I love to dance in front of other people. I love to tell jokes. I love to do all this stuff, right? And I was just a show-off kid, and I would tell the same stupid joke like 30 times in a week, because once you get a hold of something, you hang on to it.
Yes.
And then a year later, right, the abuse starts. And I went from being this kid who was just happy and outgoing and wanted to talk to everybody and was not afraid of anything, to keeping my head down, looking at my shoes, not speaking. And what I still to this day don't get is, why don't parents take note of that? Why didn't people in your family take note of, this kid went from to something must have happened, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of the dialogue is about, how do these things happen and how do we change? And that trauma, that's deep into my life. I mean, I don't think I ever danced in public again, because I used to dance and love it in public all the time. After that, the trauma started, I don't think I danced in public again until like 2017, maybe. And it was because of an incident, a wonderful incident, which became part of the show later on at a Doctor Who convention.
Yay.
Let me tell you that one real quick, because it's a great story. Okay, so I love to host panels and that kind of stuff. And I was hosting a panel called Making a Home in Fandom, The Power of Finding Your Tribe.
Nice.
And it was all about how, like, we're cool geeks around each other, and we can be geeks and we can be nerds and we can do this and we can do that and we can be really cool with each other. And I made the comment on the panel that, in the outside world, people might make fun of you and they might look down on you and you might feel insecure and everything like that. But here, we're all looking after each other. And I brought up the fact that I'm insecure about dancing. I am embarrassed. I am expecting people to mock me, make fun of me, and diminish me. And so I never do it, and I haven't done it for decades. I said, but you know what's different is that here we all are together, and we've all been bullied, and we've all been mocked. So I know if I did that, if I danced in front of you, you wouldn't make fun of me, would you? No, you wouldn't, right?
Nope.
Well, we're in the hallway after the panel, right? And there's this guy who was at the panel named Bill Panther, one of the greatest names of all time, Bill Panther.
Full name.
And he's saying to me, that's really cool what you said about that. We talked back and forth. We had another nice conversation about it. And then later on that evening, there's a dance party at the convention every year.
Of course.
And later on that evening, I don't go to the dance party ever, because like dancing makes me, it hits my neuroses. Like I can't deal with it. Yeah. And I was trying to find a friend of mine, and everybody kept telling me they were in the dance party. And I'm like, he's not, because I'm not going in there. And finally I went to the dance party. I was like super triggered by the noise and by the lights and everything and by people dancing. And I was just like, and I went and found the person I wanted to talk to, and I told him what I wanted to tell him, and I started to get the hell out of there. And that's when Bill Panther called me from the dance floor. And I'm like, what do you want? He's like, come here. I'm like, no, what do you want? And I come over, and he's like, you should dance with us. And I said, you don't understand. I've had trauma. I don't dance. I can't do it. It's something deep inside of me. It'll tear me apart. He's like, but you said at the panel that we can feel safe to do things like dancing, do things we're insecure about. And I was like,
here's your words, have a spoon.
Crap. So I danced, but I danced like this at first.
Oh,
and then a little more, and a little more. As I looked around, nobody was making fun of me. And then people were like, come on over here. And I had a little moment with somebody over there, and then over here. We were having a great time, having a wonderful time. I broke that wall that had been in front of me for decades. I broke through that wall that night. Awesome. I came home after the convention, the Monday, and I told Christy the story, and I started crying halfway through the story because I realized that I regained a part of the 6-year-old who was happy before I was traumatized.
Yes. Brilliant.
Something that I had lost, I regained. And I never thought I would regain that.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And this is what the story's about. This is what the show's about. The show's about this. The show's about how my experiences with Doctor Who have helped me heal. Getting involved in Doctor Who fandom is the only reason I had friends outside my house.
It's interesting
because I wouldn't leave the house
like that, and people didn't get it until I explained to them why, like, half my world is Doctor Who, and they're like, "Why? I don't have a religion. I don't do this." No, but you don't understand. These people get me because they see something beyond what their self is. Everything's beyond the self. It's always beyond the self.
Yes, and kindness. Oh my God, kindness. When Peter Capaldi became the Doctor. And this is a guy who, as a kid, was a fan, who got to visit the set when he was a kid. They made him. So this is a guy's the perfect ambassador for Doctor Who, right? So Capaldi is the one who has that wonderful quote, not from the show, but from himself, where he talks about that the essence of Doctor Who is kindness, and if you're not doing it that way, you're doing it wrong.
Yes. We're all stories. Make it a good one.
Make it a good one. It a good one. I was in line at a convention in Peter Capaldi's photo line. And there was a kid in front of me in a wheelchair. Mm-hmm. And, they have that little blind where they go inside to take the photograph. And you can see what's going on in there. And the kid wheels in, looks at Peter, starts crying, sobbing uncontrollably. He's so overwhelmed by the moment that this is the Doctor. He loses it. He's crying. He can't control himself. Peter says, "Can I hug you?"
Aww.
Peter puts his arms around him, and we all wait very patiently.
Of course. Aww.
Well, this kid who is facing this person that he thought he would never meet, that is a hero to him, where he gets this wonderful moment. And it was one of the greatest things I've ever seen at a convention. It was just, he came back, the kid came back to center. And when he came back to center, the Doctor's arms were around him.
Oh, I'm all. Oh, that's such a beautiful story. And that's so right. Yeah. It's so right.
It is. It is. I mean, one of the things we talked, you and I talk back and forth here on Blue Sky occasionally and stuff like that. And, the latest episode of Doctor Who has just come out. The new season has started.
Yes.
And I'm loving it so much.
I love Shnikazwa.
Oh my God. Belinda is so awesome.
Yes.
The story was so awesome.
And she's so.
There are always.
I don't know about this guy.
She's calling him on his shit. He tried to do the mesmerizing thing, which sometimes work when somebody wants it. Typical Lifetime. I'm holding out my hand. Come with me. And she's like, "I want to go home." No, you're taking me home.
Yeah.
Do not tell me what you're going to do. You're going to do what I tell you to do because this is my life.
I don't feel like being kidnapped.
Taking me home.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't feel like being kidnapped. Thank you.
Yes.
Exactly. And I love that.
Yeah.
There are people since the new episode, as there always are. This isn't going to air till May, right? So I can talk about stuff in the episode, and by then people will have seen it.
You're not going to have any spoilers.
So the big reveal that the freaking villain is an incel is so brilliant because there are so many incels in fandom, and they're still the minority. They're still not the majority, but they're there who don't realize, as someone has said recently, they don't realize this show is not for them. Right. This show is not for the incels. It's not for the misogynists. It's not for the bigots. It's not for the racists. It's not for the transphobes. It's not for you.
Right.
It is not for you. If you don't get it and you get offended, heads are exploding all over the internet right now. And they're trying to find every reason they can that they didn't like the episode, except for the fact that they themselves were portrayed as the villain, which was the same thing that happened when Ncuti first became the Doctor. Right. Every reason, besides he's black, that I don't like the show.
Same with Jodie.
Every reason, besides she's a woman, that I don't like the show. When the underlying truth is simply that they're bigots.
Yep. And when Freema...
And that they're assholes.
I have a Freema Barbie doll, which at the beginning of this video, I'll also be showing a little bit of Doctor Who stuff. But I have a Freema Barbie doll. It's in a Jodie Barbie doll, which you're about to take. And I got that doll after hunting for it for almost 2 years because nobody would sell me one because they're like, nobody wants one of those. They don't like her. She was like the most gorgeous
She was a
comedian.
badass.
She was a doctor, doctor,
Hmm.
Jones. It was just wonderful. Just the idea that she could be an equal to him, and people didn't like that either.
Absolutely.
So,
And that she did not need him
mhm.
to be out there fighting the good fight.
Yeah, she didn't need a superhero.
She was fighting the good fight regardless of whether he was around or not.
Right, right. Yes, exactly. And it did kind of bother me that they gave her, she went off with a man type of thing at the end. But then
Yeah.
she's actually the leader, so it's not like I need
Yes.
a guy to make me a
Yes.
hero. It was like this guy's my partner, not my hero. So it
Exactly.
wasn't the
Isn't it a shame? Isn't it a shame we're going to talk about, oh my God, incels and misogynists and toxic people and
oh my
narcissists? Isn't it a shame that the actor who played Mickey turned out to be such an asshole?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
the character's great. The character is the useless boyfriend from day one, right? But then he gets to grow.
yeah.
I'm the little tin dog. I just realized I'm the little tin dog. And then he goes to the parallel universe, and in the parallel universe, he gets to become the hero. And he gets a great ending. I wish the actor could have been a better person because that character arc is just
Humanity.
so impactful.
It's amazing
Oh.
to me that humanity,
And his aunt is still alive.
yeah. Well, and
And I welled up.
and also the alternate doctor, black what's her name?
Oh, yes, yes, the fugitive doctor.
Yes, future
Joe
doctor
Martin.
Joe Martin. I couldn't think of her first name. I
Yes.
kept thinking Martin, but not Martin Clunes. That's wrong. No, that would have been actually he would have been a good doctor. He probably would have been.
Certainly.
But yeah, Joe Martin. I also have her doll because she
Oh,
was.
nice.
Well, I grew up. It's gonna sound funny, but I grew up thinking that I was gonna grow up and be a black woman because I could be anything I wanted,
Okay.
and I wanted to be a black woman because all the black women I knew, because I grew up in a neighborhood that was Italian, Irish, Lebanese, and African American, and all the black women I knew were like ballsy and they didn't take crap from anybody, and they were just like doing what they had to do. One of them ran a dance company, one of them was a chef, and I was like, oh, I can grow up and be one of those. And my grandfather looked at me and went, yeah, I got something to tell you, kid. Not gonna happen. I was
Don't
so
work that way.
no, but then my dad told me, we're Italian, but we raised you white, and I didn't understand what that meant till I was about 15, because I didn't realize, what racism really was really about until I
Mm.
figured that out. But yeah, but when I see
I was
this is what I wanted to be.
I was confronted by racism fairly early on because Clinton had so many immigrants.
Mhm.
And the initial immigrant population was Puerto Rican.
Mhm.
And I had two Puerto Rican friends who lived down the road.
Mhm.
And there came a point in time when I was no longer allowed to play with them. And I didn't understand it at the time. And I was very upset. And it was later on that I realized that both sets of parents were against the idea.
See, I was in
And
busing, and I still didn't get it. I didn't understand the concept of why people didn't like each other just because of what they looked like. I did not get that. And when my birth mother would say stuff, I would just be like, what are you talking about? That's insane.
right, it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. I worked in a plastics factory, in a plastics assembly plant, and typical of who I ended up hanging around with, it was me and three immigrants in a corner of the lunchroom. It was Constance from Haiti,
Mhm.
and Kwang from Korea.
Yeah.
I forget who the other person was. But we were like the little contingent in the corner, and I was learning about Haiti. I was learning about the fact that Constance's brother, who also worked there, he never spoke. And I always wondered why he never spoke. And it turned out that he had been disappeared at one point by the government. And before he'd been disappeared, he had constantly spoken, and he was very outspoken about conditions and about changing things.
And
he disappeared for a while, and then he came back and he didn't talk.
Oh, we're starting to get.
So this is what I'm learning about working in a plastics factory when I'm like 18. I'm learning about the world and the way things happen.
Wow. Yeah, it's a gut punch. I had my friend Sylvia was from Indiga, and she would tell me stories about, in her world, slave ships were still happening when I,
Right.
in the late 70s. And it didn't even register in my head that that could still be happening. She says, oh no, the slave trade's alive and well and living in the island. Like, are you kidding me? I had no idea. But she's the one who woke me up to a lot of this stuff. And now I'm listening. What you just said just like flashed me to what's going on now, where I have, my friends who are college professors and writers and artists and musicians. And one of the reasons I like Pearl Jam so much, again, like the Doctor Who, is that the Doctor Who is that they're all about being able to express yourself and being able to be true to the power that's telling you not to be true to yourself. And they also have a big following of the incels for some reason, because they are not that in any way, shape, or form. But to have somebody tell you you can't be yourself anymore because I don't agree with how you think. And now we've got a whole government that's doing that. And taking
I know, good God.
For it. We have in a few weeks, we have a law professor coming on, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that. But yeah, and it's the same type of thing. I mean, you and I both kind of go off in different directions in talking, but that's okay. But to deal with bringing it back, dealing with the trauma of that. There is so much trauma in stopping people from being who they are and who they're supposed to be.
Absolutely.
And whether it's sexual trauma, which you and I unfortunately both have suffered, or whether it's physical abuse, which I'm sure you and I both have suffered, or whether it's just, you come from a different country. How dare you? My husband is Chinese. If he's afraid to go some places sometimes because there's this China thing that's going on. It's like, come on, it's horrifying that we are now in a world where you can't be yourself for any reason.
It's
you and me who are like saying, "Fuck that, we're doing it anyway."
And it runs so contrary to It runs so contrary to what I thought the people around me thought.
Yeah.
I grew up, Massachusetts, liberal state,
very educated,
and I assumed that all these ideas and all this voting pattern wasn't habit. It was actually an idealistic choice.
Yeah. Yes.
I got some rude awakenings. I got some very rude awakenings as I got older and started to notice the kind of things that people around me were saying. These people who claimed to be liberal.
Right.
I remember there was a point where my older sister, she dated a lot of different guys, and she was dating a person who happened to be black. And my grandmother, she was having a conversation with somebody, and she's like, and she's dating a black guy.
Oh yeah, you have to say
it. She had to whisper it.
Like, he's from.
We don't know why she's dating a.
He's from Roxbury, which is the black.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the one who introduced me to Iggy Pop, so I always thought he was awesome.
I have an Iggy
Pop. He brought an Iggy Pop record over.
Yeah. I have an Iggy Pop.
We could go into a whole thing about Iggy Pop, but
he's one of my guys, and he's a phenomenal singer still.
Oh my God, he is. He's fantastic. He's an amazing performer. Oh, here's something I didn't. Okay, I'm going to take a brief side trip on Iggy Pop because I love Iggy Pop. But in my mind, right, growing up, right, you become interested in punk music, and you learn that Iggy's like the punk father. Yeah. He's like the guy who started it all, right?
Punk, yeah.
Yeah, the Neil Young punk, and I think of him as like I always for years thought of him as like there was like Iggy and the MC5 and everything else was normal, right?
Yeah.
That turns out not to be true. Okay, and I'm only realizing this in more recent times. There was T-Rex versus Tyrannosaurus Rex, the Mark Bolan.
Okay.
At first, the unit was called Tyrannosaurus Rex, and they were doing this weird experimental psychedelic music, like psychedelic folk music. And his partner, it was a duo, and his partner had actually named himself after Peregrine Took from Lord of the Rings, which I thought was awesome. But they were doing this stuff together, right? And it was really, I have only heard the Tyrannosaurus Rex stuff recently. You can look it up on YouTube. It's really, really cool and weird.
Like Lemmy.
But having looked
Sorry.
But having looked that up, right, I then read what happened when Mark Bolan and his partner split, and Mark started T-Rex. He changed the name to T-Rex, and that becomes the T-Rex that we know, right? Well, the other guy went this way through all these different bands and different ideas, including a band that their whole gig was they did things like play protest shows in front of merchant banks and get arrested and beaten by the cops.
Wow.
Bands like the Pink Fairies, who, if you listen to a Pink Fairies record, you see the thread between the Psychedelic Stooges, which was what they were originally called,
Yeah.
and the Pink Fairies. And the Pink Fairies leads down a road to a whole bunch of other bands. There were a ton of bands between like 68 and the early 70s that were doing stuff that was the precursor to punk. And it was psychedelic music mixed with insane loudness and weirdness and pushing beyond the boundaries. So in my mind, it was like, oh, there was Iggy and the MC5. No, there was this whole movement of people.
That's how Wayne
and some of them were about anarchy for real in 1968.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the Flaming Lips were started because of all that, realizing
exactly
impressions and progressive music, man.
And Devo happened because of Kent State.
Yes. Mother's Bob. My Mother's Bob's a superhero too.
Yes. Yes. We're going to see Devo on May 1st.
That's my birthday. Tell them
continue. I will make sure when I see them to tell them to wish you a happy birthday, and I'll video and send it back. Because I'll walk in and they'll be like, let's talk to Michael.
Because that happens all the time. Actually, in my life,
all the time.
That does happen all the time. I end up
weird stuff has happened to me. Very strange stuff. We go back to Peter Capaldi real quick.
Yes.
That day at that convention, I was sitting over at a table over in the area where like the concessions were and stuff, and we were eating lunch. And Capaldi comes in a side door to go toward his autograph section. He's got his little suitcase on wheels, and he's heading that way. And I'm dressed as the third Doctor from the Three Doctors with that red jacket and everything, orange jacket. And we're just sitting there chatting. And Capaldi's like way away from us as he comes in the door. He stops dead, looks at me from a distance, and goes, "Cool jacket!" And I was like, that goes along with the time I was in a photograph line for him at Regeneration Who, and I was decked out in my opera, the Inverness cape. Don't say opera cape. The Inverness cape, and the wig and the jacket and everything. And he's a big Pertwee fan, right? This is the first time I met him. I walk in, he looks at me, and he starts fanboying.
Oh, that's so.
He's like, "Where'd you get the shoes? Where'd you get the pants? Where'd you get it?" And I let him know that if he was ever looking for a Pertwee wig, he should go to a drag queen.
Absolutely.
Because drag queens make the best wigs.
Yes.
Because a drag queen made my wig. A Texas drag queen made my Pertwee wig.
Nice.
And we had the most wonderful time. And you can see the people who are running the line at Regeneration Who going, "For God's sake, we've got hundreds of people to get through. Will you please move on?" And I'm like, "It's not me that's slowing stuff down. Peter wants to talk about my cosplay. I don't know. There's nothing I can do."
I had that happen in Farscape. The Farscape people were like all of them for the same thing. Same type of thing. This is amazing because Capaldi, English speak I can't. Capaldi was also in a punk band.
Yes.
Greg Ferguson.
Yes. Oh my God.
And
they did a song called Bela Lugosi's Birthday.
And then they let him use his real guitar on the Doctor Who show, which I thought was brilliant.
He was the punk doctor, man. How much did I vibe on that one? He was the punk doctor who was also bringing back bits of Pertwee's outfits.
Yes.
So I was in heaven because Pertwee was the first Doctor I ever saw in the 70s. And I was like, oh my God, this guy, he's me. If I was ever the Doctor.
Yeah. My dad and I would just sit there going, all right, who's on tonight? We got Sarah, we got Leela.
Leela, I've heard the evil one eats babies. I love that line.
My sister to this day still dresses in little Leela. She has like coconut bras and little weird little.
Nice. I remember when I met Louise Jameson. I met them like we meet them at conventions. Like they're not going to remember us. But she talked about the fact that the outfit that they wanted her to wear was a lot worse than the outfit she ended up wearing. She's like, I am not. You got to put a flap in here and a thing over there, or I'm not going on camera.
There's something.
Like, we're not doing that.
It's a kids show.
It's a kids show. I can't remember the story where she's dressed in the full like Victorian gown.
Oh yeah.
But she's eating like a game bird, ripping it apart with her hands. And I loved that. She was awesome.
I loved her. She was awesome.
Oh,
So
oh,
you've got the
oh.
Doctor Who thing, and we never went back to your show. We got to get back to your show.
Wait, no, wait. Let's move. Okay, so yeah, we're talking about the trauma show, right? The trauma show, by the way, in case anybody cares, is happening again on August 16th,
Thank you.
which is a Saturday afternoon. If you go to sexabusesurvivor.com, you're going to find out how to get your tickets for that, and they're free. We do take donations because it helps us do the work we do, but it's also free because a lot of survivors cannot function in the working world, and we want them to have access.
That's brilliant.
It's vitally important. Vitally important. But other shows I want to talk about.
Yes.
So we do that, and that's really, really heavy, right? Yes. So I'm doing a game show because that's really, really light.
I want to hear about this. This sounds exciting.
1970s game shows. That was my other babysitter, Gene Rayburn, Bert Convy.
Came and
I love that Bert Convy was always willing to be the brunt of the joke.
And he had the dimples. Oh, those dimples.
Oh, Bert was awesome. Bert was fabulous. But I came up with this show. We even have a game in the show called Bert, Bob, or Bill. Bert Convy, Bob Barker, or Bill Cullen. The answer to every question is Bert, Bob, or Bill.
That's funny.
He did this in 19... Bert, Bob, or Bill.
My cousin is married to the son of... Now I can't remember. Wink Martindale, I think his name is.
Oh, Wink Martindale, yeah.
His son is my cousin's husband. So we had game shows in the
so, that is awesome. So yeah, these are my babysitter. You know, I watch all these game shows. I watch Match Game. I watch Password, Password Plus, Super Password, Super Mega, whatever password was going on. I remember shows like Body Language, which was a short-lived game show where it was essentially just charades.
I love it.
I remember Jamie Farr doing charades on a game show.
Worked for Jamie Farr. I got to be his assistant at a con before. He was,
oh, that's so cool.
I have a great big stories. He would sit down with dinner and, you know, talk to my dad because the two of them look alike. So I made them talk to each other. So
nice. He still pops up occasionally on Svengoolie.
On Cameo.
Because they're both on MeTV now.
Yeah, Svengoolie is I love Svengoolie.
Svengoolie is, some of his jokes are a little
he's
out of time now.
Yeah, he's from a generation. He's
from another generation. So I'm like, okay, fine.
A little bit of the
but we'll just move on from that one and then to the next one. Yeah. I still enjoy it. But let's go back to the game shows. Game shows, right? So
back to.
So I'm like, I want to do this game show, and I was originally working on it at the end of last year, and that's around the time when my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. So we set the game show aside because, and I didn't go to conventions because you're like, honestly, when that's going on, my place is with her. So we set all that aside because, you know, we need to be together for that. She's been through radiation. I know this is a weird sidetrack, but
no, it makes sense.
She's been through radiation. She has come out strong on the other side. We got our first tattoos.
Nice.
That's a bee and it says present underneath it because we're the bees, the Broussards.
Nice.
So that means be present. She just got her tattoo, which has got 2 little bees flying around and self-love and be present on it. But yeah, so we get through all of that stuff. And then she was like, don't you want to get back to the game show? And I'm like, well, okay, let's do that. She's like, because that's good for your mental health. And it is good for my mental health. Game shows, when your life involves doing things that are heavy and helping people heal and working on your own trauma and all that, you need stuff like that. And everybody I know who does anything deep and moving also has a goofy side to them.
Yeah.
So game shows are goofy. And so this show is, it's like not every, but many of the games that you are familiar with, but under different names so we don't get sued. Mm-hmm. So we've got like high-low. Is the manufacturer's suggested retail price for this item higher or lower than the price pictured of this Weber grill? What's that from? I don't know. We got a show called, we got a little game called Blankety Blank.
Oh, for Match Game, I'm sure.
We got a game called Survey Says.
Nice.
We don't want to get sued, but we got the games. And people flock to it. They love it. They're like, oh my God, it was not difficult finding contestants.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, fun.
And there's a prize. There's a great, it's not $10,000 or anything. It's $100. But $100 is $100, right? Yeah. Everybody could use $100. So I get to be a game show host.
Yeah, that's great. You get it with.
Oh my God, since I was like 11, I wanted to be a game show host, and I swear, I am still pissed off that when Pat Sajak retired, all the way leading up to that, the freaking phone never rang.
How dare they not?
Seriously. Me. Me. Why not me? Which is actually one of the reasons I ended up doing this. I was like, not that I really expected it to happen, but in my brain, I was like, I could do that job really well. And my wife, Christy, she's like, you could do that job really well. Because I'll be sitting there with Pat Sajak. Okay, Pat Sajak. Pat Sajak was chaos defined, is chaos defined. When he auditioned for the Wheel of Fortune, they originally didn't want him because he was too much chaos.
Really?
Because he wasn't behaving like a normal game show host.
Nice.
You know, because he was saying wildly unexpected things. And they initially weren't going to give him the gig. And eventually they gave him the gig. Well, one of the things that works about Pat Sajak is he says things. He was on Super Password, and he was one of the celebrity guests, and Bert Comby said, so has anything exciting or unusual ever happened on Wheel of Fortune? I mean, maybe recently something? And Pat says, well, no one's ever been impaled on the wheel or anything, but, you know, we've had some fun times. This is Pat Sajak. Pat is total unpredictable chaos. And Ryan Seacrest is not that.
No.
I don't feel it. I don't feel it, man. They went for the safe guy. I don't want the safe guy. I want the one who will say the crazy shit. Like Gene Rayburn would say the crazy shit. I want the Bert Convy. You know, I remember he randomly would accidentally blurt out the puzzle in the middle of a round. And they came back from one of the commercials. He had duct tape over his mouth crossed like that.
Gene Rayburn used to spend summers in Massachusetts, and also Christmas he would do every year at the place I worked at, the Charles Playhouse. He would do a Christmas Carol. He would tell stories about in between the shows and match game where they would get lotto because they tape 3 or 4 shows a day, and they'd be drinking during the day, and in between guests they'd be drinking some more. And Jack Klugman and his ex-wife were there, and they were getting blotto, and so. The drunker they got, the funnier they got, and standing back, the dirtiest jokes that they couldn't end. Oh my God! Oh, he would have the best stories. He would have the best stories. So, but that's the other.
It was a special
game shows.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
The hosts were actors. They weren't car salesmen and whatever.
Yes.
They are now. Now there's Drew Carey broke a bit because he was he's a comedian. His name was Wayne Brady. Right. Actor, comedian, but a lot of the guys that hired, like Ryan, was just a radio host. Like I've never done that for 40 years, but he wasn't doing acting and he wasn't doing all that other stuff. They could have gotten.
He doesn't have. I'm not picking on the guy. He does what he does well, but he doesn't have that.
No,
he doesn't have that. He doesn't have the unpredictability. He can't pick up on what somebody's saying and make something out of it.
Really good at red carpets.
And that's what a game show host has to be able to do, you know? And also take genuine interest. When you're interviewing somebody, take genuine interest in the interesting thing about them. Right. When I was recruiting contestants, what I say is, tell me 3 interesting things about yourself. And that's how I judge whether I want somebody as a contestant. And I have got nothing but fantastic things. Some serious stuff, some silly stuff. One of my favorites is the guy sends me his 3 things. And one of his 3 things is, my dog eats chicken feet. I'm like, I can't wait to talk about this. This is going to be great. And because I'm a game show freak, right? I know that you do a pre-interview. So you bring people in, you do an orientation, you do a pre-interview, you get some idea who they are, so you get them to learn the game. So by the day of the show, they know what the hell they're doing. And I got to tell you, putting it together has been a hell of a lot of fun because it's an excuse for me to go all over the internet and get all of this information and all of these like weird trivia things about game shows and what the various hosts have done in other parts of their career. I learned that Bob Barker is Native American.
I did not know that.
I did not know that.
What is
he grew up on a reservation. I forget what tribe it is.
Yeah, West Coast or East Coast, or North or South. See, I know
it was West Coast.
I'm Micmac.
So. I think it's West Coast. But I somewhere I have the tribe he is part of because it's part of one of my questions. But You learn all kinds of things about people. You learn that Bill Cullen was the guy who came in whenever anybody dropped out. Bill Cullen came in.
Yeah, and
anybody got sick, Bill Cullen came in.
He couldn't walk. He would have people help him get to the podium because his leg was so degraded from his, I don't remember, it was polio or whatever it was, but he had all this horrible disease in his leg. But the sweetest guy, hilarious, and the thickest glasses.
I loved him. I'm a Bill Cullen fan. I'm a Bill Cullen fan going way, way back. And then I just feel like he had it too. He totally had it.
Gary Moore.
You know?
Gary Moore had it.
Gary Moore. Exactly. Gary Moore. There was a lot of great just people who had that special quality about them. And we talk about improv, right? What is being a game show host but improving constantly?
Yes.
What comes at you?
He's good at it, yeah. He was in House Full of Honkies in LA. Which was an improv troupe out of Groundlings, which was great. You know, I was in Second City in LA when he was doing that.
I envy you so much for having been in that. I studied improv and I had a wonderful time. There's a Philly Improv Theater here, and they're probably the best school in Philadelphia. And I was fortunate to have as my teachers. My first teacher was Kristen. My second teacher was Amy. Kristen Shear and Amy Rowe. They were a team called the Kristen and Amy Show, or the Amy and Kristen Show, depending upon what week it was. And so I got to study with two of the best improvers in town, who now live in different parts of the country completely, and occasionally improv via Zoom. So I learned from Kristen. I learned the fact that your whole job is to support the other person. Your whole job is to vibe off the other person. Your whole job is not to try to draw them somewhere, but to take what they're giving you and give back, right?
Yes.
And that was beautiful. And then from Amy, I learned, don't try to be funny.
Yes. I beat that into my students' heads so hard. It's like, don't try to, and yeah, milking the attention. It's only going to get.
And sometimes improv isn't funny. Sometimes it's not funny. Right. I did a show called Wrong Answers Only, and it was my idea of like, how do I pull the rug out from underneath myself during a show? And the idea was I would start telling a story, and like the other show I did, I would let people ask me questions, and each time they asked me a question, I would tell the next part of the story based on whatever they asked me. And it was up in the air whether I was telling the truth or not about my life. Right. I would just make stuff up. Or sometimes I wouldn't make stuff up.
That's my whole
maybe I'd take some piece that was actually not actually me. Or I would refer to somebody as my mother who was actually my aunt. Or I would, all this other stuff. And the whole idea of that was the audience became the other improvers.
Yes. Excellent. That's a great lesson to teach yourself. And it's a hard lesson.
It is, because reality, great things happen when you're not trying to control things.
Exactly. Life is improv. Life is improv. And then you do all this stuff and you study this stuff and you go back and watch Columbo, which you really enjoyed. Yes. And you watch Peter Falk and the other actor, when he's got a good one, you watch them vibe off each other. You watch Peter Falk and Ruth Gordon vibe off each other. And you're like, Ruth Gordon, Mom Smaisley, and Phyllis Diller. Those Mom Smaisley and Phyllis Diller and Ruth Gordon were my top three when I was growing up. So, and then
nice, nice. But yeah, to watch two actors who came up through a lot of these actors who ended up on Columbo with him had come up through the same training.
Yeah,
and so they learned to be generous.
And and what I really like is a lot of these folks were. Kind of suffering the same type of thing. There wasn't a lot of work. So what do? You create the work, which is kind of what we're doing.
Create the work. Yeah. Exactly. And, exactly. So that's the whole idea. It's like, I love the idea of who knows what'll happen.
Is your game show airing? Can people find that online, or is that going to be?
Yes, it will be happening. It's happening on June 14th. Okay. If you look up the event, which is, it's called the Game Show.
Okay.
The Game Show. And you can go to gameshow.eventbrite.com. Gameshow.eventbrite.com. And you get your tickets there. And they're pay what you can. Because again, I want people to be able to afford to come to things.
Online.
And we're also still looking for some backup contestants because you always have backup contestants, and they get to go to the front of the line for the next time we do the show.
Oh, that's so cool. Michael, you have got to be one of the most interesting people I've met in my entire life. And I'm not just saying that because you and I both have the same like interest in everything. Life's too boring not to be interested in everything. So, but I was a little.
I would say we're right back at you. Right back at you. This has been so much fun.
When I was a little girl, I used to get on my bicycle and I would be so mad because I would say, I don't want to live a boring life ever. And I think I was all of 6 or 7 when I said that. And that became my mantra. And I didn't even know what a mantra was. I just watched the Krishnas down the street giving me daisies. And I'm like, oh, that's a mantra? No, but I decided that from that moment on, I was never going to live a boring life. And from that moment on, I started doing TV, auditioned for Zoom. I did before Zoom that was on computers. There was a TV show. I did all these
Zoom.
Boston, Mass. 02124. Yeah. So, I was going to go to art school. I was going to do stuff. I was going to be stuff. I went to summer. I mean, everything I did was always going to be the biggest, whatever I did, and that's how I ended up meeting Gene Wilder. That's how I ended up being in weird movies. It's how I ended up doing every single thing I've done is all because I didn't want to be bored. And I think you kind of have that same vibe.
And look, you did it. Let's just observe the fact. Let's pay tribute to the fact that yes, you did that. You achieved that thing you were trying to achieve. And yes, exactly. I can't imagine not doing these weird things and not being who I am. And this is not to say that there haven't been times in my life that I've been so insecure that I folded back in on myself and tried to conform. But those were mistakes. And this, as I get older, right, it was actually, Bowie talks about the fact that getting older is all about becoming who you really are.
Yes.
And as I get older, I become more and more who I am. And who I am is an unpredictable creature who likes to go down rabbit holes and then see what I can do to make art out of that.
And isn't that a wonderful way to live?
Oh,
it's a good way to live.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
I'm gonna tell everybody this has been the Aunty Sochelle Hour-ish show. Our guest today has been Michael Broussard, who is the most wonderful human being in the entire world that we have talked to today. And I hope you enjoyed him as much as I do. And do visit his websites because he also has a spot where you can tell your story and
yes,
well, which is pretty cool. So you won't be alone, believe me. There's also some phone numbers that you can contact if you have issues with some people in your life that might not be treating you so well. But there's also really cool stuff like the game show, which I think you guys are going to be really into. And do watch Doctor Who because there's nothing better.
Oh yeah.
When you see the Doctor, there's nothing better to do than to run, I think. And we'll see you next time on the Aunty Sochelle Hour.